We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. Okay, as we have an apparent serious oxygen leak.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. I think we need to do a little more all-weather testing.
Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we take you through all the mistakes, failures, and explosions that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn, he, him.
Chris, he, him.
And an EP Chris, he, him.
And I'm going to avoid the preamble here and just say that this series that we are getting into will have the biggest content warning I can possibly give. Bit of a boomerang to say that immediately after other Chris introduces himself as EP, but it is what it is.
There's no getting around it.
You can mulligan that if you want to.
There is no getting around this. I'm not going to change my intro, but to swear this early, listener, it's going to get fucking grim.
It is.
Maybe not now, but it will.
Yeah, and that is because this series is going to be a long one, and we are going to be talking about Peenemunde, Mittelwerk, and Mittelbau Dora, which was a network of Nazi concentration camp factories that turned slave labor, suffering, and wanton cruelty into Wernher von Braun's V2 missiles. We are going to be talking about the history of the factories, why they were built, how they ran, their impact on history, and we're going to be covering the accounts of their survivors.
And why, if you ever watch the movie October Skies and you just hear Wernher von Braun's name come up again,
yeah,
not a good guy.
For the sake of making this series as historically complete as possible, we will be talking about all the details, the torture, the executions, the exterminations. Again, I want to be clear up front on this so that listeners can be informed. I will also tell you right off the bat that the first 2 episodes will not be as bad. Mostly, this episode is concerning the early history of the V2 program, as well as the Peenemunde Army Research Center. But as the series goes on, it will get very grim very fast. We will give running content warnings as we go. We will let you know when stuff is about to get bad. And as with all of the episodes where we cover this is going to be by far the most grim series that we have ever, topic that we have ever covered. And I do recommend that listeners, even if you can handle learning about it and want to learn about it, it may still mess up your day.
Not may, it will.
Yeah. Because this is also going to be a long series, we may break it up with a bit of a palate cleanser episode in between. But everything will still be marked in the, all the titles will still be marked so you will know. People will be able to follow along with the series and get just the parts of this series. This is also not going to be a discussion of the design of the V2 rocket, as in the actual hardware, the design decisions. That will all be covered in a future series, and I don't know when. We're aiming for this to be the history of the V2 as a project and as a program. The people, the politics, and organizations that created one of history's most infamous weapons. I don't really have a preamble for this. Normally we would do a bit of chit-chat before. I don't know about you guys. I don't really feel like doing that, talking about this topic, even though, again, this episode is not going to be too bad.
Outside of just the little bit of preamble we had before recording, I can't summon anything.
Yeah.
Series sourcing.
Now, as far as sources, I have used several, and instead of just rattling them off, I want to take a minute to actually explain a few of them, why I'm using them, and which ones I rate and trust higher than others. First off, I used a couple of books by accredited historians, specifically The Rocket and the Reich by Michel Neufeld, and V2, A Combat History of the First Ballistic Missile by T.D. Dungan, to cover the broader history of the V2 program, the Peenemunde Research Facility, and why Mittelwerk was created. I also used accounts by Mittelwerk survivors, like the book Dora by Michel and A Teenager in Hitler's Death Camps by Benny Grunfeld. I also read Operation Paperclip by Annie Jacobsen, and this is one that I wanted to put a bit of an asterisk on. Fans of the show may be aware of my opinions toward pop history, that trend where a journalist or a novelist finds a small niche topic and writes a best-selling book on the topic that does far better than any historian ever could. They're well written, they tell the history in a very exciting and compelling way, and they are very often full of errors. At best, these can be just little flourishes to punch up the story, but at their worst, the popularity of the books can mean that the lies are amplified and become established fact to thousands of people. Here I am specifically thinking about Starman, the Yuri Gagarin biography whose author just repeated lies told to him, stuff like Yuri Gagarin sitting at Valentin Bondarenko's deathbed, or the story of how Vladimir Komarov died screaming. Any of these things that become the core of established space conspiracy theory, purely just because an author does not want to look things up. I am thinking of The Wrong Stuff, a hilariously wrong best-selling book about how the Soviets lost the moon race because they were dumb stupid heads and they only managed to launch Sputnik, Laika, and Gagarin because America let them. These are, again, all very well-selling, very well-reviewed on Amazon books that every historian in the field has trashed. And while I don't think Annie Jacobsen's book, Operation Paperclip, comes nearly to that same level of inaccuracy, it does have a lot of the same hallmarks that make it harder to trust than work by real historians. I am not an expert, and even I was able to find a shitload of errors in just the first few pages of the book. She claims that the V2 was modified out of V1 cruise missiles. She claims that Walter Dornberger worked for Heinrich Himmler instead of the two being rivals. And as space historian Michael Neufeld, who wrote one of the books I used for this episode, said whenever he reviewed Operation Paperclip, quote, "On page 13, she describes von Braun associate Arthur Rudolph as a high school graduate, even though he had a 2-year engineering technology degree. In my primary area of expertise, the V2 and von Braun, every discussion of these stories throughout the book is error-ridden. Jacobsen also misidentifies Third Reich leaders and organizations, gets the details of the reorganization of the U.S. military in 1947 wrong, and misspells the name of famous diplomat George Kennan in every reference to him. It leads me to doubt the accuracy of every story in the book that I do not know so intimately." Now, all that is not to say that the book is bad or that every story it tells is wrong. Pop history can be a force for good, exposing niche topics to new people, by boiling down the primary literature into a more approachable form. And in fairness, Jacobsen did track down and interview some sources that were not found by previous historians. There is some novel historical info in this book, but I have limited myself in using it to just stories and quotes that I could verify against other sources. I am only using it at all because A, it is much better presented and told than a lot of historians' books, and B, because it teed up this chance to talk about the effects of bad writing on a very small, very niche field like space history. You know, because of how small it is and because of how unknown space history is, it is very easy for an established journalist or author to come in and just kind of make up a bunch of truths, whether intentionally or not. And whenever anyone bothers to try and correct them, it's normally in a blog that no one has heard of. I'm not trying to make this into any kind of high horse. Normally, I am not above telling our stories in more exciting ways, but for this topic, I don't want to risk putting out anything I can't back up.
Now you're making me think. I'm worried. What if there's an FTL fact check blog somewhere?
We have to go looking for that. And at the same time, like, I have repeated, especially in the earlier episodes, I know for a fact that I repeated some of those dumb conspiracies before learning better through this show. If I'm remembering right, I think I repeated the Komarov conspiracy way back near the start.
Life is a beautiful thing that we can all live and learn and grow as podcasters.
Yeah.
If you're not podcasters, it's a little different. You know, I think that's wrong because I feel like Kash Patel's probably a good counterpoint to my very example. But
yeah. I was going to say, for me, the pop history trend is kind of like when a big podcast like platforms a lunatic and never brings on like critics. At any rate, that is the sources that we are going to be using for this series. For this first episode, it is very heavily just going to be the books The Rocket and the Reich and V2 A Combat History, because we are not going to be getting into middle work in this episode specifically. Still, As always, all links will be down below in the show notes.
Dornberger, von Braun, and the VFR.
Now, we have talked about this in previous episodes, but I will give a primer here for anyone who has not listened to them. Any discussion of rocketry in World War II needs to take into account the rocket craze that kicked off a decade before Germany invaded Poland. The rise of science fiction novels and comic books like Buck Rogers, the space proselytizing of figures like Max Valier, and the early work of rocket pioneers like Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, Hermann Oberth, and Robert Goddard, all of this created an atmosphere where rockets were seen as the next big thing. They were this futuristic, almost magical technology that would send humans to the moon and the stars beyond. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, amateur rocket clubs started popping up around the globe, staffed full of students that wanted to pursue their sci-fi dreams. And many of those students would go on to be pivotal to the modern space industry, for better or worse. Sergei Korolev and Valentin Glushko got their starts at rival rocket clubs that were later merged together. The United States had the American Rocket Society and the Galset Rocket Research Group, famously where Jack Parsons got his start. And Germany had the Society for Space Travel, or VFR. And I cannot stress enough how often there is a straight line between these early rocket clubs, World War II missiles, and the Cold War moon race. A lot of those enthusiastic students would be the exact same rocket scientists launching the first satellites into orbit. Anyway, all through the late 20s and early 30s, these rocket clubs are firing off test launches and they're exchanging letters and notes with each other. Most of them have practically zero support or funding, so they don't evolve past being amateur clubs. But the VFR in Germany was luckier. A lot of histories will present this very simply. Von Braun and his students were having fun playing with rockets, until Walter Dornberger discovered them and realized that the rockets could be used to sidestep the Treaty of Versailles. That is not necessarily true. There are elements of truth here, but again, it's a heavy simplification of what actually happened and of all of the people involved in this process. First off, practically from its inception, the VFR had been a political organization. While some members like Willy Ley and Walter Hohmann, the guy who the Hohmann transfer is named after, a pioneer of orbital mechanics, these guys were steadfastly opposed to Nazism. Many more members of the club didn't just view it as an opportunity for more funding. They were active and enthusiastic early members of the National Socialist Party. The Nazi movement presented itself as technocratic, as futuristic and sci-fi. It was going to modernize Germany and bring all of these high-tech wonders of the world to the average German. To a bunch of sci-fi, comic-obsessed students, this fit right into their worldview. They, like rockets and Nazism, linked up perfectly. And I have this as a note here, but there is also the fact that Werner von Braun and his brother Magnus, their dad, also named Magnus. Nazism wasn't in the family, but Werner von Braun grew up in a, I'll say, ultra-conservative family because his dad Magnus was a prominent politician in the German National People's Party, which was like only slightly to the left of the Nazi party at the time. And they kind of wind up being like second fiddle to the Nazis when they finally get elected. And Magnus actually lost his job as a politician in 1920 because he loudly supported a failed right-wing coup against Weimar Germany. The von Braun family was heavily involved in the German far-right from very early on. At the same time, Germany was busy rearming itself and trying to find ways around the Treaty of Versailles. Since the rockets weren't explicitly called out in the treaty, theoretically, Germany could make as many military rockets as they wanted and still be compliant. Kind of letter of the law stuff. And this is one where I have to point out that historians disagree about how important that factor actually was. And I'm going to read here a quote from V2, A Combat History. Skirting the Versailles Treaty was not the primary reason for rocket research, especially later on, after Hitler began violating its terms incessantly. Rockets were seen as potentially superior weapons to artillery, having a longer range and greater mobility. This was particularly true for liquid fuel rockets, because they offered much greater range with heavier payloads than solid fuel rockets. So basically, a lot of the time, the German rockets are presented as a way of getting around the Treaty of Versailles. But other historians point out that Hitler never gave a shit about, like, they weren't trying to hide that they were breaking the treaty. You know, they were pretty flagrant even in the early 30s about just like, hey, we don't give a shit, and daring the world to stop them.
Fantastic. Jesus Christ. They're starting out strong.
Yep. As a final factor, 1929 was the start of the Great Depression. VFR membership plummeted, most of their financial backers abandoned them, and the people remaining in the club started to get desperate. They started to go looking around. It was the VFR, not the German military, that pitched the rockets as weapons. I'm blanking on his first name, but a member named Nebel, and no, not the guy that the Nebelwerfer is named after, specifically was a prominent member of that same far-right party, the German National People's Party, and he became the VFR's main kind of networker. He was going around trying to sell their rockets as weapons. Also, side note with history, that is literally how Sergei Korolev got every single, ruble of funding that he ever got, just pretending that his scientific rockets were weapons. So, it's got a long history. Now, while the German army was interested in the work that the VFR Rocket Club was doing, they did not want to work with the club itself. In 1932, Walter Dornberger, a young artillery captain working for the German Ballistics and Munitions branch under Colonel Emil Becker, arranged for the VFR to come to an army test range to demonstrate one of their rockets. The Ballistics and Munitions branch is basically the section of the German army in charge of R&D, testing new weapons, and crucially, before the Nazis took over at least, the Weimar army was still trying to find some ways around the Treaty of Versailles, and that is part of what the Ballistics and Munitions branch does. Dornberger was the guy in the organization pushing for rockets, but Becker also had a lot of experience in new and experimental artillery. He'd been around since World War I, and he was crucially one of the guys behind the design, building, and operation of the massive Paris gun that was used in the Great War. So this is one of those original colossal artillery, railway guns that fire artillery shells the size of a small car. And this is the guy that they put in charge of the, I think it would be the Reich army at the time, prior to the Nazi takeover. This is the guy in charge of the army's R&D.
And he's just off snorting stuff and coming up with this.
Well, again, it is Emil Becker is doing kind of bigger picture stuff. He likes the rockets, but Dornberger is going to be and if we're talking about figures who show up later in history, who continue to be part of this, Dornberger goes to the US. Dornberger continues, he is the military side of the V2 program. From its start, we are in 1932. He is going to stay with von Braun all the way through the moon race. He is there every step of the way. He attaches himself to von Braun.
Surgically.
Yeah. That's not to say he's a parasite or anything. I think that kind of removes some agency from him. Walter Dornberger is the man who makes the V2 a weapon. Big fucking pillar in hell.
Congratulations. The Torment Nexus. It's right here. Get in.
Yeah. So in 1932, Dornberger, between a mix of him finding them and Nebel kind of networking at him, he arranges for a test, and he arranges for Colonel Becker to go out and watch this test of a VFR rocket.
I'm sorry, but that's a hell of a sentence. Just networking at him.
Yeah. That's basically what Nebel is doing around this time. He's just kind of spamming out letters to anyone, because the Air Force, the Luftwaffe, is becoming a thing. The Army is a thing. The Navy is a thing. As time goes on, the SS becomes a thing. And every one of these branches, it's the same thing we see in any military when rockets come around. They all compete over this.
I'm sorry, but the little bit of pod brain took over and I just heard the content gun is getting pointed.
Yeah. And
just for lack of a better term. And I know it sounds stupid, but still.
And anyway, this test goes horribly. The rocket immediately flies off course, and Becker was so disgusted that he ordered all ties with the VFR cut. So this is crucially something a lot of stories will present this as Dornberger, the German military hires the Rocket Club. They get one chance to work with the German military, they fuck it up, and they are cut off for good.
Fantastic. Fuck them.
But Dornberger recognized the skill of some of the members of the VFR, and he opted for a middle road. He headhunted the best of them, offered them more pay, and gave them scholarships for their education if they worked for the army. And again, these guys are all halfway through their undergrads at this point. This is how engineers and scientists like Werner von Braun, Arthur Rudolph, and Walter Riedel came to work for the German military. As for the rest of the VFR, they were pushed out of the picture fairly quickly. Now that the military had its own rocket people, now that they had stolen the cream of the crop, they no longer wanted some random civilians playing with rockets. Quote, The end came commiseratively when a group of Nazi pilots began demanding access to the Raketenflugplatz. Brackets, that's where the VFR, like the Raketenflugplatz was where the VFR was originally doing their tests. It's kind of like a small airfield. And the Nazi pilots wanted to use it for use as a training ground. The VFR refused them. Mysteriously, an outrageous water bill appeared from the city for over 1,000 marks, an amount the Rocketeers could never afford to pay. So basically, like, the VFR stops being a thing at that point. The German government, the German military just kind of shuts them down through a bunch of like bogus water and electricity bills. And then their old launch site gets taken over by the Luftwaffe. Yay!
I love classic and just infighting. Get some real shit flinging going on.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to say that there are happy moments or fun moments in this fucking series that we're talking about.
No, you see, I would dare call this a fun moment for the simple fact that just, cool, you got hit by the same bureaucratic shit hammer that everyone deserves to be hit by in your government.
Yeah, and like having researched a fair amount of this for like the Cold War stuff, like the US military, the Soviet military, the infighting among Nazi Germany military branches and the inner circle is like, they took it to 11. These guys they're both masterful and incredibly bumbling at constantly trying to fuck each other over, because it's all just based on like, you know, sucking up to Hitler.
Yeah, and I love that for them.
Yeah, especially whenever they take each other out in dumb and hilarious ways.
Listen, if there's anything I'm for, it's stupid Nazi shit killing stupid Nazis.
Yeah.
Just go ahead, take out your own trash, and I'm going to sit here with rest in piss.
Not rest in peace, rest in piss, Ernst Röhm.
Yeah, rest in piss, you won't be missed.
Now, for the engineers that made the jump into the military-industrial complex, that being your von Brauns, your Rudolphs, your Riedells, they got everything they had ever hoped for. They went from like Jack Parsons tier, like making shit out of garbage,
into more garbage.
Random money that some mysterious person just gives you and you have no idea who they are, and then they disappear off the map. And suddenly they are working at an actual lab. They have actual equipment. They have actual funding. They were set up at the Kummersdorf artillery test range just south of Berlin and given professional test equipment they could only dream of as amateurs. I did look it up. It is Kummerdorf.
What is Dorf?
What is Kummer?
It's the cum village.
It's spelled Kummersdorf.
That's not any better. That could just be Germanification of cum.
Yeah, it's Kummer's village.
As far as I'm concerned, German is surely a deeply unserious language.
Yeah, we're in the Nerdo universe. We're in the cum village.
That's /J, by the way.
Whoa. I don't know what /J means.
It's joking. It's just a joke. I'm not
/Jordan.
All right. I don't know. If any fucking Germans come at us in this series, I am going to be significantly less likely to kind of take their complaints.
Tell us we're wrong and we'll make sure it gets wronger.
With this series, whenever I say that I don't pronounce names right of people I hate, I'm just doing this for all of Nazi Germany. Every town. I don't like if I'm talking about it post-war, I'll fix the pronunciation. If it is between the period that the Nazis are in power, I'm pronouncing it wrong. But yeah, around this time, von Braun got his PhD with a Wehrmacht grant. From 1932 to 1935, the engineers worked exclusively for the army on von Braun's Aggregat missile program. So that means that's German for aggregate. And before it became a vengeance weapon, the V2 was officially the A4, the fourth iteration of the Aggregat program. But all of that is still a ways out. Most of the work at the Kummersdorf facility involved the A1 and A2 missiles, and I would encourage you to look up a lineup of the Aggregat missiles, both the ones that were made and the planned ones, because the A1 and the A2 look nothing like the V2 or its derivatives.
They're stretched Tylenol.
They basically look like propane tanks. They are about 1 meter long, they don't have fins, they are stabilized with a really crude gyroscope. They're bottle rockets that you can ignite. That's pretty much it. Although this was also pretty standard for the time. These rockets were comparable to what like Robert Goddard was experimenting with in the States at the time. They weren't revolutionary, but they weren't exactly behind the curve either. Now, the rocket work going on at Kummersdorf was strictly for the army. The Reichswehr at this time, and then once the Nazis take over, it becomes the Heer. But that doesn't mean it didn't get noticed by other branches. Kummersdorf was just a short drive from Berlin, and it wasn't just a rocket research facility, it was an artillery range. It was the Army's main R&D facility, so, like, von Braun and his team, they are sharing this. I think they said that the small workshop that they were in was used by 80 people of all kinds of different projects. And this also meant that any of the work going on there quickly got noticed by other organizations, other branches. And one of the first outside groups to take an interest in von Braun's rockets was the new Luftwaffe, specifically its head of aircraft research, Major Wolfram von Richthofen. And yes, he's related to the Red Baron. And yes, that's probably why he got the job.
I heard Richthofen and immediately thought COD zombies.
How tangential is this relation? Like, what is his...
I think he's like a cousin.
I was going to say, I really wanted it to be his son, because then I could be my chud son, but...
my chud son
cousin.
joining the fucking National Socialist German Workers' Party.
Behold my son, Chuddles.
For what it's worth, he's going to fuck up badly.
Cool, Chudsworth the Chuddles. Just eat shit. Fantastic.
He goes to Kummersdorf. My fucking chud son goes to Kummersdorf.
My chud son goes to Cum Village, got it.
He watches one of these like dumb little propane tank rockets and he gets rocket pilled. And he immediately asks von Braun like, hey, I know you work for the army, but what if we strapped these to a bomber? And basically what he wants is a liquid-fueled version. Like, he wants a liquid-fueled JADO pod, which Jack Parsons, famously a few years later, he would be doing this with solid rocket fuel, which is significantly safer.
Wait, that's where the cum comes in.
So...
there it is.
Well, we're going to get to that in just a second. So von Braun accepted and they worked up some prototypes. The first test went badly. The rocket detonated as soon as it was ignited, and it destroyed the fighter aircraft that it was attached to. The pilot miraculously survived somehow. The second test worked much better, with the fighter shooting into the air powered by 1 metric ton of rocket thrust.
Ooh.
Yeah. In the end, though, the Kummersdorf pods that von Braun made, they weren't selected. This is one of those things like the Arado jet bomber, I think famously by the end of World War II, was using some of these Rado pods, and they were made by a guy named Helmuth Walter. Von Braun was kind of like Korolev in the sense that he didn't use hyper melt your face off stuff.
Oh, he played it vanilla.
Yeah, he liked using liquid oxygen and a mix of water and alcohol for the V2.
This is a man who loved fucking in the missionary position for purely procreation purposes.
Exactly.
Not even getting weird with it, and he proclaims to be a rocket guy, and he's not getting weird with it. I'm fucking disappointed.
Well, then you have a guy named Helmuth Walter, and this is the guy who invented the Messerschmitt Comet rocket plane. He also invents the JADO, Rado, whatever, rocket-assisted takeoff pods that go on some of the later German jet bombers, and they are full, like, he's the guy who invents T-Stoff and C-Stoff. He's the guy who puts teenagers in a rocket plane, like, they will just melt you like the fucking blob.
So that's what we're looking for. We finally found the weird propellant guy.
Yeah. I think he invents, he's the guy behind, can't remember the name of it, it starts with a B. It's like the tiny German rocket plane that was meant to launch vertically from a rail.
Oh, where the rockets fly out of the nose of it, like that thing?
That one.
Okay, can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, Helmuth Walter, he works for the Luftwaffe. He's kind of their pet rocket guy.
He's our pet weirdo.
Yeah, but throughout all of this, like all of these different branches, they wind up having a pet rocket guy. Like the SS gets a rocket guy at one point, but von Braun and his team are always the golden standard. So everyone's always trying to like get a little bit of work from them. And the army is also constantly trying to protect him and keep him away from the other branches.
They're trying to insulate their weird guy from getting poached.
Yeah, no, that is a very real risk. And like we will see in this story, it continually happens. Everybody wants to get, like, rockets are a new toy, even if they are not that well understood at the time. And even if like the German military doesn't fund them all that much, everybody wants von Braun.
What is there? Just a van, just a blacked out van parked next to the property with
God, it's him
with free oxidizer just written on the side, and they just have to keep like shuttling him away. Like, no,
no, sweetie, over here.
Remember what we told you? They're lying to you.
There's only C-Stoff in there.
No, it's just a single SOE guy with a gun.
This is just making me think of the Rocket Mail dude, Gerhard Zucker, and how he forced his friend's wife to go on a mission into Germany to try and get him some of his rocket fuel.
I forgot about
After
that.
which she was almost picked up by the Gestapo before escaping with it in her hat box.
Why is your hat box lightly smoking?
Now, those new connections in the Air Force would become useful very quickly. In 1936, it was decided that sharing the Kummersdorf facility with every other weapons program in Germany wasn't feasible, and that developing a more advanced rocket meant having a facility of their own. There was also the problem of secrecy. Dornberger imagined that a big part of rockets' value as weapons would be like the psychological effect that they could have on enemy troops. And that surprise would be ruined if every Berliner could just see the test launches out of their window. They are like 25 kilometers down the road.
Just who the fuck threw a lawn dart over here?
With the approval of the army, von Braun went on the hunt for a location. Quoting from V2, A Combat History, "A location on the island of Rügen was at first thought to be suitable, but there was no way it could be wrestled from the German labor front, as it was destined to be the official Nazi beach resort for all Union workers. While visiting his parents, von Braun's mother suggested he look at Peenemunde. She said her father used to go duck hunting there. Von Braun followed her advice and took a trip to see the area himself. It was perfect." And I like this because it also gives you an idea of like how low the priority for rockets is at this point. Like, you know, this is the weapon that later on Hitler will put almost all of his stock into. And in 1936, they're being told like, fuck no, this is our beach resort. Get out.
You're blocking the sun. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, the contrails.
Everyone's lightly exfoliated from the constant leaking of hypergalls.
And with Peenemünde, we also see more of this inter-service jockeying for rockets. When von Braun told von Richthofen about the new facility, he immediately offered 5 million marks from the Air Force towards its construction. And this immediately pissed off Becker and the army, who pledged 6 million marks as well, not to be outdone. It's not a bidding war because both branches put up the money, but they're like, 5 million. Fuck that, I'll do 6. They're trying to make sure that they have 51% of this facility, but it is going to be an all-rocket facility, and it's going to be a combination of Army and Air Force, somewhat working together.
We just have the shithead bidding war starting off.
Kind of, yeah. And we'll get to this, but the facility does wind up like being a mix of Army and Air Force, Luftwaffe.
Oh, I hate that for them.
Yeah, both Vengeance weapons are developed in Peenemünde separately. The V1 cruise missile is a Luftwaffe invention, and it is also made like about a kilometer away from where the V2 is first tested. This new facility, I cannot stress enough, is the heart of practically all German rocket research during World War II.
Peenemunde Army Research Center.
The Peenemunde Army Research Center, or HVP in German, was by far the most advanced rocket research site in the world. I'd argue only being surpassed by Tura Tam in like the mid-50s. Von Braun and his team went from sharing a cramped workshop with 80 other engineers to having a massive sprawling test site almost to themselves. Spread out over 15 kilometers on the island of Usedom in northern Germany, the facility offered a perfect test location. It was far from prying eyes, far from any fighting, and test rockets could be sent north into the Baltic Sea. Peenemünde was split into several, I'll say sort of districts, each handling different parts of the test process. You had Peenemunde East, the main army research facility that von Braun and the others worked out of, designing and fine-tuning their rockets. It was also home to the world's largest and fastest wind tunnel. Peenemunde South was the factory complex where new rockets were built before being shipped north for testing, and since this facility was technically a collaboration between the Army and Air Force, the Luftwaffe got their own district, Peenemunde West, where they'd develop and test the V1 cruise missile. At the far south of the peninsula, a new town popped up with housing for over 3,000 people. It had schools, shops, clubs, and even a sport field. And I know all of this isn't directly relevant to the story, but I do want to bring this up again just to show the massive jump in resources between Kummersdorf to Peenemunde. Peenemunde was Rocket City. It was basically Star City before Star City. A show of institutional support for rocketry that would not be replicated in any country for over a decade after the end of the war. We will get into this. Germany is not even like 110% ride or die on rockets yet. This is just them giving like von Braun the tiniest bit of support, or the army at least giving him a decent amount of support. And this is like light years ahead of what any other rocket team or rocket club has at this point. It will take like 5 years after the end of the war for Korolev to be able to drum up this kind of support.
Oh shit, okay.
Yeah. This is one of those things where it's often presented as like, oh, they just had the best people, they just had the best know-how. No, a lot of it I think comes down to Dornberger more than von Braun, because Dornberger is the guy who is like networking this. He is the guy who is putting his neck out. He's the guy who is fighting and arranging funding for all of this. I guess as well Richthofen, but he's kind of more along for the ride. Like Dornberger and von Braun are fighting the bureaucratic battles to like get this done.
I like the idea that my useless chud cousin could, by merit of name alone, garner all of the necessary funds that we possibly could ever need to develop our projects. And that's all he does.
Like, I'm trying to think now if the cousins, and it would have to be the side of the family where the cousin has your same last name. Can't be on your mom's side. And like, I'm trying to think now if a cousin of mine with my last name tried to like do something, either get a job or do something horrible off of the fame of my last name that I have never uttered on this show, I don't think I'd be happy. Then again, if this is a Red Baron situation, I'd be dead.
I would be thoroughly killed.
So, oh well, shot either by a Canadian or an Australian. I think they sorted it out that it was the Australian guy, but oh well. Yeah, dang. A lot of childhood pride washing away.
Don't worry. We will all be nubs by the end of this.
Now, with more funding and army support, the rocket program rapidly grew to fill its new space. Dr. Walter Thiel, no relation as far as I can find, was brought on to design the V2's massive new engine. Dr. Rudolf Hermann, one of the best aerodynamicists of the area, was lured away from the University of Aachen by the promise of basically working on the world's biggest wind tunnel. And once he was there, he also, they rapidly recruit the best aerodynamicists in Germany for this. But while von Braun was building out his dream team, Walter Dornberger, who was now a colonel, was running into the full force of Nazi bureaucracy. The Aggregat program was a purely army project, taking place at an army facility and with strong backing from the army. Dornberger was able to get personal approval from Army Chief von Brauchitsch. Probably mispronouncing that, don't care. This was a little easier than normal because Dornberger was actually Brauchitsch's protege. They had worked together. Dornberger had been his subordinate officer in the 1920s. And Brauchitsch was personally invested in helping his star pupil out. And this is the guy who is the full head of the army under Hitler. This is one of those things where it's not just networking skill, it's that they have these contacts. Like Dornberger, the military guy heading up this rocket program, just happens to be best buds with the head of the army. And he is going to fucking exploit that for as long as it lasts. Brackets, or as long as von Brauchitsch lasts, which isn't long.
Before he is compromised to a permanent end by some, packages delivered.
We'll get to that. Hitler gives him a heart attack.
What, does he just call him and just scream nightmare, nightmare, nightmare until he dies?
Hold that thought for a bit.
Fuck.
Yeah, Hitler yells at him enough that it gives him a heart attack.
Fuck you, buddy. You deserved it.
So yeah, Dornberger, he has all of these connections high up in the army. And they had also wisely made the Luftwaffe their allies instead of their rivals. They were sharing resources at Peenemünde. They were sharing staff back and forth between these projects. But this is Nazi Germany in the late 1930s, which means that anything you're doing, you need Hitler's approval. You need him on board if it's going to last. In early 1939, Hitler was given a tour of the Kummersdorf facility and shown the progress that the rocket team had made. Dornberger hoped basically that wowing the Fuhrer would pave the way for mass production of the V2, something that they had a little bit of funding for research, but they had never gotten approval to start a factory or a proper production line. And until they get that approval, they are basically building one rocket every year of these early A1, A2. If they want to speed up their testing, they need to get mass production rights. They do not get that from Hitler. We don't really know what Hitler thought of the rockets because he reportedly didn't say anything through his entire, or he said practically nothing through his entire visit. Dornberger was like explaining all of the progress. They were showing him a couple of like rocket test launches, some static tests, and he apparently just stayed like perfectly stone-faced and bored the entire time. And when he left, he simply told them, quote, "It was nevertheless grand." So the war starts in September 1939. By this time, Peenemünde is completely set up and everything has been moved over from Kummersdorf. Von Braun and his team have run several launches of a subscale model of the A4, what they call the A5. I don't know why they named it. They added a number for the smaller test article. Whatever.
I mean, some dipshit obviously went ahead and just assigned A4 prematurely.
It's like, boom, final product. And then they get there and they're like, shit, we need another test article.
Fuck, what do we do?
I believe that is actually what happened. Yeah, like very early on, they said the A4 is going to be our operational missile. And then they get there and realize like, oh,
it's kind of ass.
We need to skip this one. And at first, World War II doesn't have any impact on Peenemünde. They are isolated, far from any fighting, and things are going well early on, so they're able to maintain their priority status. They get money, they get people, and they get raw materials. Then, in early 1940, Hitler delivers them a personal kiss of death. Quote, "Less than 6 months after von Brauchitsch had placed a high-priority order on the Peenemünde work, Adolf Hitler canceled the directive. Claiming Germany would have no need for the enigmatic ballistic missile, he had convinced himself that existing weapon systems could do the job of waging war. Funding the improvement of existing weapons made more sense, since he believed the war would be over in a few months anyway."
Yeah, by Christmas.
Like, continuing the trend of Hitler being famously good at personally intruding into weapons programs and just saying either, like, we are going to dump truck money into this thing, or shut it down right now. Especially with this story, we are going to see that Hitler, like, he is hot and cold. He is on and off constantly. He's like, he will shut down your project, and then a month later, he will demand to know when, 5,000 King Tiger tanks are going to be ready. In March 1940, Hitler also centralized all Nazi weapons productions under Fritz Todt, his new munitions minister. A die-hard Hitler loyalist, Todt was also a personal opponent of the rocket program. Like Hitler, he kind of viewed it as this extravagance and something that wouldn't actually win the war for them. Also, as Germany's munitions minister, Todt was well aware that the German military, even in 1940, like, they were not well supplied. They did not have nearly as much weapons production as they claimed. In fact, since the start of the war, German weapons production was dropping, largely because they kept conscripting all of the dudes building the weapons. And I guess you can also look at things like Germany only goes into total war in 1943 because Hitler really doesn't want anyone on the home front to feel the war, which means that at a time when Germany is actively losing the war, they have still kind of tied themselves to all of the factories need to be making radios and shit. And as a bit of an aside, around this time, Werner von Braun also got a strange message. He was informed that SS head Heinrich Himmler wanted to offer him a place in the organization at the rank of SS lieutenant. It didn't matter that von Braun was actively working for the German military. The appointment, according to Himmler, did not have any strings attached or extra duties. It was just, hey, do you want to be in my club?
I hate Himmler so much. Imagine if you had, your evil, pathetic mini-me minion.
Oh, yeah.
And his name was, Dongold Trunt, you know what I mean?
Guff Chunder.
Guff Chunder.
But yeah, basically, at this point in the story, Himmler, spoiler alert, whatever, Himmler is going to factor very heavily into this story as we go on, especially the very grim side of it. Himmler, the guy largely, orchestrating the Holocaust. But at this point in the story, there is no evidence of Heinrich Himmler doing more than just kind of watching the rocket program. And whenever he does, this isn't to defend Werner von Braun, because Werner von Braun stays, he gains rank in the SS as he goes. He actively pursues this. Whenever it first happens, Heinrich Himmler basically just sends him a letter saying, yo, do you want to join the SS? And von Braun does not want to until Dornberger convinces him. And this, because again, this is still a period where the A4 program, the Aggregat program, is still on uneven territory. They don't know. They still have to be kind of scrambling for support here and there. Fritz Todt, the munitions minister, is trying to shut them down every single day. So Dornberger argues hey, if you turn this down, maybe you will insult someone who could be helping us.
Would you dare insult one of our potential patrons?
Basically, yeah. Dornberger and von Braun basically use this as a networking opportunity, which is, you could argue that is why Himmler wants von Braun in the SS, because that makes him technically his guy. It's just more of this kind of inter-service jockeying, and specifically now that like Heinrich Himmler is getting involved, like Fritz Todt is not really in Hitler's inner circle. He's kind of like an outsider guy. Walter Dornberger is definitely not. Von Brauchitsch is definitely not, because Hitler hates him personally. With Heinrich Himmler getting involved, like the rocket program is finally now embroiled in active inner circle Nazi drama, which is, if played properly, it is incredibly profitable. And it is also incredibly easy to like get your entire program disappeared into a concentration camp.
It's just the kiss of death at some points, usually more often than not.
You are playing a high stakes game and everybody there is a fucking snake. Through 1940, the A4 program was kind of trapped in this tug of war between the army and the Nazi government. Dornberger and von Brauchitsch kept finding new ways to raise Peenemunde's priority for people and funding, only for Hitler or Todt to smack them back down. With workers being reassigned to the front lines and materials being redirected to U-boat production, the rocket program slowed down significantly. But because this was Nazi Germany, all their problems and also all the solutions to those problems flowed from Hitler's inner circle, which in this case means Hermann Göring.
Christ's sake. Okay, and here comes the misery engine.
Every fucking like inner circle dipshit factors into this story in a very real way.
I didn't want to turn too far away from the correct history side of things, but also want to lean into the calling people things wrong on purpose because they suck. I mean, you are talking about Göring, so it's
fucking Herr Schmidt himself.
Yeah, it's Hermann Mayer.
Yeah. In late 1940, Germany lost the Battle of Britain. Göring had boasted that he could cripple Britain and pave the way for a land invasion with the Luftwaffe alone. And when he failed, Hitler started to look at rockets as a more reliable way of bombarding London than the Luftwaffe, and he ordered Todt to give Peenemünde back its priority status, but only for testing. Also, as a note, this is actively because as soon as the Battle of Britain is lost, Dornberger starts sending more letters to Hitler, basically saying, if you had funded our rockets, this wouldn't have happened. We could have done it better than the Luftwaffe.
That fat shit wouldn't have eaten all your resources.
He is both shameless and effective with it. And it does work here because, again, like his argument is basically that a rocket, a missile, is a giant artillery shell. It can deliver more payload than a bomber. It doesn't risk a plane. It can fly. He crucially says that it doesn't care about weather. You can fire it night or day. Again, do I think that this actually would have worked? No, because we see that, V2s, whenever they are fired on London, they kill a lot of civilians. They kill several thousand people in London and Antwerp, but they have no measurable effect on the war. And I do not think they would have won the Battle of Britain if they were firing off V2s.
Just a matter of cool, you hit no actual, you hit no infrastructure of value.
It's like Dornberger is making an effective networking point by telling Hitler, like, hey, Fatty with the bombers failed. I can do better with rockets, even though he is also wrong.
My slick missile will do all of the things.
Yeah.
Having to go through all of this again, like with the historical context of like knowing who these people were and like having learned about them previously.
Yeah.
And now kind of living through it again and then comparing it to like their modern contemporaries. I'm like really sitting here thinking about like, I really wonder like what would it be like for Pete Kegseth to actually have to do something in a wartime environment. Childish blame game stuff will happen.
I'm trying to think, and like I feel like he would definitely do the Göring thing of just making himself a really, really, really fancy uniform.
Well, meanwhile, his eyes are floating in his own skull for like 8 hours a day.
Yeah. So on the news that the Battle of Britain has been lost, Hitler gives the V2 or the A4 a testing permission. And then a few months later, Dornberger, like, he's still not happy. He wants the full production. So he goes and he meets with Hitler and he convinces them temporarily to give them the production run. Quote, after the meeting, Hitler commented, "This development is of revolutionary importance for the conduct of warfare in the whole world. The deployment of a few thousand devices per year is therefore unwise. If it is deployed, hundreds of thousands of devices per year must be manufactured and fired." Hitler still had no understanding of complex missile systems. His ridiculous pronouncement for suggested rocket stockpiles in 6-digit figures was far in excess of the available resources. Nevertheless, the meeting did succeed in securing continued funding for the manufacturing plant at Peenemunde without the interference of Minister Todt. So this is also the other, we mentioned this before, the other issue of dealing with Hitler if you are trying to get him to fund your project, is because he can occasionally just turn to you and say like, yeah, have 1 million of them ready by tomorrow.
Do it.
There is a report that Dornberger gives Hitler. We will get to this in the second episode, but there's a report that Dornberger gives Hitler that is basically like, hey, if you give us all of the money, if you give us everything we hope for, 4 years from now, we will be able to make 5,000 missiles per year. That's his final prediction. And Hitler misreads the report. And he comes back to Dornberger and says, I want you to launch all 5,000 of the missiles on London right now. And Dornberger, like, you're talking to the head of the Third Reich. You're talking to a guy who, like, will have you killed. And Dornberger has to kind of like, Mein Führer,
that's
yes,
not what we
sure.
said.
He just winds up agreeing and leaving, is what happens.
Quinn, I know that you're probably not, the Hitler expert per se, but how long into him leading the country do you think it was before he was like in the position where he's being like Truman showed, where like his minions could just tell him things and he just believed them?
I'm not sure of when. I think it's got to be like 1942 onward. Like, we will get into this in the second episode especially, but like in 1942, Hitler sacks the head of the army, von Brauchitsch, and takes full control. Like he takes personal control of the entire Wehrmacht, and all of the final decision making is down to him. So it very quickly becomes a thing of like, oh, how do we get Hitler to agree to the thing that we want him to? Make him think it was his idea. Manipulating him is something that a lot of officials get very good at very quickly. Not helped by him just kind of immediately becoming a physical wreck. Again, though, not an expert. Even though dealing with Hitler always had its kind of weird, like, he demanded hundreds of thousands of rockets manufactured per year. He, like, shouts this at Dornberger during this meeting. Dornberger had still managed to secure everything that he wanted for the A4. They now had priority status. They had production rights. Basically, they can now go to Fritz Todt and say, I need 20,000 people and I need this much steel. Hitler says you have to give it to me. They have now secured their supply lines so that they can build this factory, so that they can build more A4s, so that they can test more A4s, so that they can get the V2 operational sooner. This was basically the start of a good run for the A4 rocket program. With funding sorted, the next problem to tackle was manpower. And this is kind of a fun one because it involves Nazis dying. Whenever they started off, like whenever they started doing conscription in World War II, Germany did not really have a system for picking out educated, valuable people. So what that meant is that a whole lot of chemists, PhDs, and like physicists found themselves on the front line as infantry. And Dornberger basically wanted these people. Von Braun, they realized that there were all of these valuable people who were being fed into a wood chipper, especially as like Operation Barbarossa gets started. And they devise a plan to rescue, quote unquote, a lot of these like very valuable experts who have been sent into fucking like Moscow and are getting like churned up at the front.
A front that could be best described as a Cuisinart for human beings.
Yeah. And because these guys are like, all of these guys are already in the military, they cannot, like, von Braun is not, he's in the SS, but he's not in the military, quote unquote. All of the people working at Peenemünde, most of the scientists are not military members. All of these guys at the front line are, so they can't just dismiss them and make them civilians again. So Dornberger's solution was to turn the scientists, or to create a pseudo-combat military unit at Peenemunde. And this was called the Versuchskommando Nord, or VKN. And again, it's all of this like legalese stuff, where all of these guys who have been sent to the front, they are infantry. They are classified as infantry. So Dornberger is just like, I need 600 infantrymen at Peenemunde. I need a full, like, what is on paper, an official combat unit. These guys have rifles, they've got kit and all that. But this unit, the VKN, is 600 chemists, physicists, and engineers. It basically just exists for like he's going along the front line and he's just finding anyone who looks valuable and he is assigning them to like the Peenemunde front. Like, you are needed to fight in northern Germany. Again, just as a way of like getting these guys off of the front line and getting them into von Braun's team.
Everyone thinking, wow, I'm finally saved. And then you have the first Hypergall incident.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you have gone from the Eastern Front to the Peenemunde Front, and you arrive just in time for Helmuth Walter to show you his new Comet rocket plane. Here, hold this, hands you like a vial. And they did still have one more problem, which is that even after they had convinced Hitler, Fritz Todt was still trying to cancel Peenemunde's funding and redirect all of their resources towards conventional weapons. Like he, in the same way that Dornberger was trying to find these like legalese, these loopholes, Fritz Todt is still doing that in like 1942.
I have a feeling we need to get a bingo card going for this one of just, you know, hey, are we misappropriating resources? Do we have massive internal beef?
Yes to both of those all the time. Those are both free squares on the bingo card.
They're both going back to back in the mix.
It's a superposition of like, if you are in the Nazi war machine, you are stealing resources from something that is more useful.
Half of the bingo card is free spaces.
Yeah, like, unless you are at the factory that makes winter uniforms, and that factory is getting 0 fucking Reichsmarks, whatever, every other, like, Uber weapon project is completely superfluous at this point.
Fantastic.
But anyway, yeah, Fritz Todt and his organization, Operation Todt, he is still a problem. And then that problem sorts itself out because Fritz Todt, in early 1942, he gets on a plane, and then that plane crashes, and he dies. And then, and then the exact same day, there are reports that Hitler took his death very badly, that like, because he did like Fritz Todt, because Fritz Todt was like a big loyalist. He was a huge Hitler fan. He was a sycophant and Hitler liked him. But that did not stop him literally within like hours of finding out, of just going, Albert Speer's replacing him, my personal architect. He's going to lead the German war effort now.
Imagining a scenario in which Trump replaces Elon with Barron.
Just instantly, you know, like
frame one.
He puts out a truth social about how he's very sad to have seen him gone, and then 2 hours later, he's announcing the new head of nationalized SpaceX.
It's a time of healing. It's a time of whatever.
Shut.
It is also worth mentioning, like, this is another problem that, like, lifts from the Aggregat program. Albert Speer, he's just an architect that Hitler likes, and the guy who is now in charge of all of Germany's war material is also a rocket fanboy. He has seen a couple of the rocket demonstrations, and he's really into them. So basically, over the course of a year, the A4 program, the Aggregat program, mostly through Dornberger's political maneuvering, managed to go from like, Hitler thought it was like this wasteful vanity project. It had to be defended by the army. Everyone was trying to get it canceled, to it very quickly becomes Hitler's new favorite toy. It has the support of Albert Speer. It has all of the personnel and all of the resources it could want. And yet, and this is where we are going to cap off this first episode in this series, being Hitler's favorite is an incredibly dangerous place to be.
Because it means he's paying the most attention to you.
Yeah, and it also means that he is the most likely, like we said before, he's the most likely to just make up numbers. For him to just say like, hey, Dornberger, how are those 2 million rockets coming along? And you have to give the Fuhrer an answer, or you're dead. Again, I keep saying that is like, oh, it's this like impossible situation. I sure would hate to be in that situation. Like, fuck Dornberger. He puts himself in this situation. He earns a place here. Dornberger, I think, earns a place in hell right there with Werner von Braun.
It's kind of like hideously beautiful to me how little authoritarianism changes.
Yeah.
Just watching them slide into their own beds that they have made. Here you go. Get in.
So yeah, listener, this is the end of episode 1. Episode 2, we are mostly going to be talking about the first V2 test flights, Peenemunde's discovery by the British, and Heinrich Himmler. That one is going to be worse than this one, but it is not going to be as bad as it gets. Basically, listener, we feel it is important to cover this early history so that you have the full context of the entire story. Even if this first stuff is like, you know, haha, Nazis fucking each other over kind of stuff. It does get bad, and we are trying to warn you beforehand that it does get really bad. That is not going to be this episode, or it wasn't this episode, and it probably won't be next episode. But 3 and 4 are, yeah.
I believe the proper term is escalation here.
Especially as the war gets worse and worse for Germany, they get... I don't fucking know, man. I'm not even going to try and justify it of like, oh, the war got bad. No. These guys wound up doing the thing that they were pretty much always going to do.
The war went bad for the shittiest people who ended up, at least some of them, getting what they actually deserve.
Not enough of them.
Not enough of them, no, but...
Bunch of them got rewarded. Yay.
And there comes the pain.
Yeah.
The pain.
I'm taking solace in the fact that some of them did, in fact, become wind chimes.
Some of them did, and a fair number of them. We didn't talk, like, there's a couple of, like, deaths via explosions. Mr. Teal, he's gonna get his comeuppance in episode 2.
Wait, first name Peter?
No relation.
Okay.
As far as I can tell. Yeah, listener, that has been episode 1 of our series on Peenemunde and Mittelwerk. We will be back soon. We will have the second episode also out in September as we get caught up from my absence. And then at that point, we will be back with mainline episodes every 2 weeks. Like we said, we may put a bit of a palate cleanser episode in between, but this series will still be clearly marked so you can follow along in the proper order. Is there anything you guys wanted to say at the end? I'm not going to try and like, how are you guys doing? Drag anything out of you.
I like that you had to chime in with Mickey Mouse to ask me how I was doing.
So that's just my stupid cutesy voice, yeah.
I don't know, vile offspring of Walt Disney. How do I feel about the subject matter?
Badly?
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know, it's hard, especially like right now of all times, you know?
But yeah, listener, thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that it has been at least informative, and we will see you back soon for episode 2 in our series on the V2 program. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye for now.
Thank you to everyone who have signed up to support the show. And a big shout out to all of our top tier patrons. Our cyborg cats are Boss, Katiger Reptile, Charlie, Comrade Sleepy Bro, Daniel F, Graham E, Jesslyn T, Jorg 2, Sapient Egg-Shaped Helicopter, Kamo, Lane of the Wired, Mobius Striptease, Murray Motorsports, Mysterious Stranger, Number Negative, Oil Drum, Pat, Paul C, Rare Scrungle Spingus 3rd Edition, Source Force, Spectre Cohen, Tortilla Baron, Vivek D, and Wingsmith. Our space dogs are A Union Thug, A. Blinken, Akiogo, Ack Guy is Best Guy, Agent Carter, Alice N, Angie, Angry Old Man, Yada Yada, Anthony C, Atomic Hobbit, Otto Fox, Baron M, Bat They, Ben L, Boomzilla, Brian L, Caleb, Cantaloupe Was Taken, Chainsaw Snuggling, Charles G, Cole C, Captain Lag, CSD 2016, Daddy Bongo, Daniel, Double Time, Dr. Shockmaster, Ank, Aaron, Eric J, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, Grant K, Griffin, former snow shoveler of Burger King, Heiko S, Howl's Moving Pictures by Rush, Ian R, Ian W, JMM, James C, James T, Jamie K, Jarl Breadmaker, Jerry M, Jedediah D, John C, John Boy D, Jonathan G, Jonathan W, John Tastic 20x6, Juan, Carathago Delenda S, Kate B, Kate D, Corbin the Dog, Lenswipe, Lorgath, McLean C, Mar, Marto, Maritza, Mitchell L, Moomin Instrumentality Project, New Name, Nicholas S, Norman W, Northeast Driver, Outlook Cub, Panda, Petey, Poop Butt, Randall, Rato B, Sailor of Fortune, Sam A, Scott K, Sean H, Central Kazoo, Sean P, Silly Beast, Smut R Us, Sparks, Spirit of Thunder, Swanee, The Best Sean, Thomas M, Tim P, Toasty Ken, Trash Do, Barash T, Brisk, Will W, Will O, Zachary JB, Zaf, Zemo, Zim, and Zombie Dwarf. Albert Count, 162. Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we are Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcast on YouTube. FTL intro and outro themes were provided by DJ Danarchy.